A key to success for any entrepreneur is knowing how to pitch their product or service. Here to lead our next session is a master at successful pitching, Scott Ewing. Scott Ewing is co-founder and principal business analyst in the Appalachian Investors Alliance, which works to foster growth by improving access to seed and early stage capital. Scott leads investment due diligence for AIA's network of micro venture funds representing 150 plus accredited investors and over $20 million in local impact capital. The Appalachian Investors Alliance has been active for several years in supporting West Virginia entrepreneurs through work with Tech Connect West Virginia, the West Virginia Jobs Investment Trust, the Innova Commercialization Group, the Robert C. Byrd Institute at Marshall University, and other West Virginia private and public entrepreneur-oriented activities. Scott is a financial industry veteran, experienced in market research and analysis, investment sales, technology transfer and commercialization, and startup funding. Prior to forming AIA, he was president of Venture Insight, Inc., a venture capital operating company specializing in tech transfer and IP commercialization. Later, Scott served as chief operating officer in the Tennessee-based Angel Capital Group. During his career, he's been a FINRA registered investment representative, a College for Financial Planning accredited asset management specialist, and a real estate market analyst. From 1985 to 2005, Commander Ewing served as a U.S. Naval aviator, performing in challenging assignments as a search and rescue instructor, executive transport pilot, space operations specialist, and operational intelligence officer. Scott, we want to thank you so much for joining us today, and we're going to turn the presentation over to you and let you go with your information for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ann. Let me call up my screen. It's good to be with you again this morning. And I'm wondering who that guy is that you were just talking about. Wow. I'd like to hear from him today. So I'm going to talk to you about what makes an investable entrepreneurial business. And what you're going to learn in the next few minutes is what angel stage and seed stage venture investors look for when they're deciding to invest. In other words, I'm going to pull back the curtain, I hope, and let you see things from the eyes of the investor when we're watching a pitch. As Ann just said, I'm the principal analyst and co-founder in Appalachian Investors Alliance. I've got about 15 years now experience in both public and private market investing. Prior to this stint, I was, as Ann said, a VCOC CEO, and I hold a master's degree in business intelligence and analytics. I just say that because I think sometimes people like to know who they're listening to. I was a 20-year Navy pilot. The number of takeoffs I had equaled the number of landings. That's always a good thing. I'll warn you that I'm purported to be an irredeemable contrarian, but I disagree with that. AIA, my group, is a 501c3 nonprofit. We were launched, as Ann said, in 2018, and our mission is to revitalize the region's economy by organizing private capital into angel funds that can put their money to work in Appalachian-based entrepreneurial businesses. The numbers have actually grown since Ann and I talked last. We've got over 200, almost 280 active accredited investors in 14 funds covering 10 states. And to date, we've put about 12.7 million of private money to work in entrepreneurial companies. We're a provider of technical services to member managed funds. And I'll tell you that our funds rely on us to help them with due diligence, among other services. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. So you've heard the term due diligence. It's really just a fancy term for checking it out, right? So I personally, this is my method, I don't want to receive a pitch from an entrepreneur until I've read their business plan. There's not very much I can learn from a pitch that I won't know after reading a well-crafted plan. But what I can learn from a pitch is if the entrepreneur can sell either to investors or perhaps to customers. I can learn how well the entrepreneur thinks on his or her feet from the way they answer questions and respond to the investor audience. And I also can learn a little bit about whether the entrepreneur is likely to be troublesome. And that's something that investors are always on the lookout for, right? It's never easier to work with an entrepreneur than before they have your money. So we don't like to believe, it's not that we think you're untruthful, but we don't like to believe at face value what an entrepreneur says about their own business or themselves. You're, as an entrepreneur, you're biased, right? You like your idea, you like yourself, we hope. And we're pretty sure you're putting all that in the best possible light when you pitch to us. So due diligence, the process of checking out the company and the entrepreneur, should provide investors with unbiased and independently sourced information about the deal. And proper diligence helps take bias and emotion out of investors' decision making. I'm going to talk to you about our investors method. We follow what we call a 10-step quick look process at the start. Not all angel investors follow this approach, but some prefer to take a pitch or meet the entrepreneur first, and some couldn't care less about business plans. But personally, I start with this quick look, and it's designed to uncover reasons to disqualify an entrepreneurial deal. And why do I say disqualify? Well, understand this is at the start a deselection process. Investors see far too many promising deals to dwell on a marginal deal. We can't keep going back to an entrepreneur and say, well, we sort of like it. If you make it better, we'll like it more. Really, there are other deals waiting in the wings behind the one we're looking at, and we need to get to those, right? So all investors need some method for weeding out what appear to be flawed deals. Even if the deal isn't as flawed as it might first appear, investors don't want to spend their valuable time reconsidering first impressions. So in this business, first impressions matter a lot. Here's 10 steps that I go through. First of all, if you approach me with an application for funding or approach our investors, we're going to check out your company's website. Is there one? Is the registered domain just a name, or is there a Facebook page? What exactly is the company's online presence? And then when we hit that site to see you from the eyes of a customer, are we going to find things like broken links and 404 errors? Those are just easy to fix things. A company that's attentive to its own web presence should never allow those things to linger on their website. Is the website just a tombstone page, right? Or is it content rich? Content rich sites, by the way, are better, much better, in fact, necessary if you're interested in search engine optimization and you want to have your website come up early when people on the list, or at the top of the list when people are looking for your product or service. Is the website professional looking, or is it done by an obvious amateur? Is there a product mock-up or actual product shown? And here's one that I think a lot of entrepreneurs don't appreciate. Is there a physical address in the contact information? We still live in a world where having a physical address means some form of permanence or presence. It adds validity to your business. So even if you think you're just selling on the web or not really going to have a brick and mortar storefront, by all means, you need to have a physical address in your contact information. Then we check out as step number 2, the founder's social media profile. And, the old adage, stupid is as stupid does, especially on social media. Would you give your money to a stupid person? Probably not. So we look at what you say online, and not just your business presence. We can look at what you say in other channels also. Resume padding, by the way, is especially obvious. And if we see that, it tends to create questions. So be careful the way you describe yourself in places like LinkedIn. Terms like serial entrepreneur, thought leader, strategist probably need to be backed up with some substance, right? If you call yourself a serial entrepreneur and we see very little evidence that you've had successful entrepreneurial launches in succession, maybe you ought to reconsider that term. Are you working full-time or part-time in the business? No time in the business? That sort of thing also is evident from social media profiles. Number 3, from a description of the business on the company's website and social media, we're going to look to see, is there a plain and easily understood description of what the product or service your company provides is? And why should anyone care? Why should someone care to trade their money for what you're offering? That ought to be evident, and you ought to make that case clear and plainly on your website. Is there a call to action in your company's website, or is it just information? Is there a way that you can create contact links or engagement with your customers? CTAs, or calls to action, are very important, and it shows that you're thinking about how you're going to sell to your audience, something we look for. Again, these are all the early stage discriminators. We're going to go through this fairly quickly, but we're going to check these things out. And I think most investors have some form of doing this, whether they call it a quick look or not. Another thing we do is we check registrations of your business with the online portal of your Secretary of State, right? Is the company an actively registered business? And what's the business structure? How long has your company been in existence? Have the annual reports been filed on time? Remember, I said a few minutes ago, whether or not the entrepreneur is going to be potentially difficult to work with. Well, if you're someone who has a history online of starting businesses and not perhaps filing registrations on time or things like that, that could be a telltale. And then also online, what we're going to probably want to know what the street addresses are of the company's office or officers. So that's information that's easily available to us, and we'll check it out. We're also, once we have the street address of your business, we're going to check out using online GIS tools such as Google Earth. Does your street address match your company street address, match your business location or a business location? Is the company operating from a residence? And if so, and that could be okay for an early stage company, or perhaps a company that doesn't require much plant, property, equipment, et cetera. But is it appropriate for the type and stage of business? If you tell me you're an advanced manufacturing facility and I go ahead and look online and find out that your company address is a mailbox in an apartment complex, I'm going to wonder about how much advanced manufacturing you can actually do from the apartment. Whereas if you're an independent software coder working from home, that could be perfectly appropriate. We're going to look online, and this is my number 6 quick look topic. We're going to look online about press that the company has received. And genuine positive press is easy to pick out as opposed to puff pieces and PR, that is placement pieces. So we'll look for that. We'll look to see what's online, what's been written about you as an entrepreneur and your company. And we're also going to check out industry news and information about your competition. We see a lot of different businesses from a lot of different industries. We obviously can't know everything about all industries or sectors, but we can research pretty quickly into a sector or into an industry and find out if what you're proposing and what your value proposition suggests matches up with what appears to be competition. So we'll look at the competitive landscape. We're going to check out your company's prior fundraising efforts. This is my step number 7. Has the company tried to raise funding? Have you tried to do crowdfunding? Maybe on Kickstarter, Indiegogo, Fundable. That can be a double-edged sword. Now, crowdfunding, if you run a successful crowdfunding campaign, is a strong positive. It tells investors that there's a genuine audience or market for your product or service, right? So if you can advertise that you've done a successful crowdfunding campaign, investors will applaud you. But on the other hand, it can be a negative if the campaign didn't make its goals. So we'll look into that. We'll also see if the company has tried to raise money on an equity crowdfunding platform such as WeFunder or Gust, iSelect, AngelList, et cetera. How long has the deal been up there? If it seems to have lingered for a while, that may not give us much confidence. Is there information on the company's financing available on PitchBook, Crunchbase, who'sraisingmoney.com? Those are industry websites that track venture capital deals, and we'll look at that. We're always a little weary of companies that have repeatedly raised new rounds of capital without growing value for its investors. For example, as a subscriber to PitchBook, I get information, or I can just look at the SEC's website, the EDGAR database, and I can see if you file for successive Series A, Series B, Series B1, Series B2, different types of raises over time where your value didn't appear to grow. Something we obviously are concerned about. We want to see a steady progression from seed to perhaps Series A and beyond of growing value for the investor. And how we see that is the size of your raise will generally be larger with each successive round. and the valuation will have gone up appropriately. Number 8, we're going to check out court records and background records online for a company or entrepreneur we're interested in. Most states provide their civil case records and family law cases online. It's not hard to look, and some states even put criminal records online, or a basic background check. And yes, investors do pay to have background checks done as they get more interested in a deal. A basic background check can be done for a very low cost or almost for free nowadays. So the entrepreneur has had legal battles, et cetera. If they're explainable, that may not disqualify you. If they're not explainable, that can be a problem. We're going to check out if you're an IP-based company, your patents, and we'll look for published patents and published applications. And that's, by the way, that's private or public material. A published application is public information. So there's not really any reason as an entrepreneur, if you have a patent or have a license to a patent and it's published, not to let us know what that is. That's just kind of silly. A patent, by definition, teaches the art to someone that's versed in the technology. So investors gather their information on the value of that intellectual property and potential competition based on patent citations. We're also going to look to see if the patent is assigned to the company. Here's a big one. Entrepreneurs very often are inventors. Inventors may have patented something in their own name, but then started a company and not assigned the patent to the company. That's a deal killer. If you're a company and your value is based on your intellectual property, the patent needs to be in the company's name, not the entrepreneur's personal name. And then we're going to check out financial assumptions. This is my number 10. If we're getting quite serious about a deal, ready to really put it into full due diligence, I'm still in my quick look, but we'll do a quick financial assumption check. And as one venture capitalist I worked for once said, the only thing I know about your pro forma is that it's likely to be wrong. We're all expecting to make that there are errors in projecting into the future what a company's finances will be. However, and we can live with that. We can live with a little bit of a deviance as time goes on. But are the assumptions valid? And I'm going to show an exercise right here, and I'm going to be very quick with this. Here, you'll see in the lower left-hand corner of this particular slide, accounts receivable days. That's an assumption, right? How many days will it take to get paid once an entrepreneur or business makes a sale? And across the top, I've circled here the revenue line. And let's just say from fiscal year 22 to 23, in this example, the entrepreneur expects to go from $849,000 of revenue to $3,083,000. And that's great. But the difference between those two, in other words, the difference in sales from 22 to end of 23 is presumed to be $2,234,000. Well, you've heard the adage, it takes money to make money. I'm interested, and I look at the gross margin that this company says it's going to have, let's say 80%. That means 20% of their revenue needs to be put back into the cost of goods to provide that next level of revenue. So if I can make that a little more clear, if you're going to grow your sales here between 2022 and 2023 by 2,234,000, you need to have 447,000 or thereabouts available to buy the materials that you're going to manufacture your product with. That's cost of goods sold, so that you can increase your sales, right? Sales don't happen by magic. And here's the thing I'm trying to stress with the assumptions. That $447,000 you need as an entrepreneur to bring your sales from the $849,000 level to the over $3 million level, 447,000 divided by 365 days in a year from 22 to 23 means that you need your business needs to come up with an additional $1,224 per day to make the stuff, to make the sales. And if I think that you're going to be paid 90 days after you make the sale, that means you've got to cover that 90 days while you're still waiting for the money to come in. So $1,224 per day times 90 days is about $110,000. So you need another $110,000 or thereabouts on top of your $447,000 that you need in material costs to grow your sales. And I'm not even including your operating expenses going up, just cost of goods, to grow your sales from 1 year to the next, from 849,000 to over 3 million. And that works out, that 110,000 plus 447,000 works out to be 557,000 or thereabouts. So what I need to see, here's what I need to see as an investor, making a quick look at your financial assumptions just from year 22 to 23. I need to see that you've got $557,000 available to add material, to make stuff, to make sales, right? So I look down at the bottom line and I see on your pro forma that you're going to be in 2022, 1.2 million or so in deficit, right? Your negative cash flow there, and you're expecting still not to be profitable in 23. So I know that you're not going to be able to cover the cost of additional sales with organic revenue. That tells me that you need more investment cash or investment capital put into your business to cover that. And when I look at your financial assumptions, I'm going to see, have you taken that into account? The bottom line is, and think about this carefully, when you're making a pro forma, very often there's some magical thinking we see in this, that the revenue is just going to go up and up and up and up by increments. And yet the company may not be profitable enough to fuel that growth in sales. And the entrepreneur isn't taking into account how much more money they're going to be asking for from investors. So that may be a little bit complex, but I wanted to get through it quickly. We check those kind of financial assumptions and look very carefully at that. So if you're not comfortable with your assumptions in your pro forma and you've created one, have someone that knows a little more perhaps than you do about finance take a look at your pro forma before you bring it to the attention of entrepreneurs, because they'll dig in on this. And as I said at the start, if the assumptions and the projections don't really match up, we probably don't have enough time to go back with an entrepreneur and massage that on their behalf. So button yourself down with your financial assumptions before you go pitch for funding. Here's just another little thing, and I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but you should know this. We are often accused sometimes in the venture capital industry of being vulture investors, right? That we're interested in taking an entrepreneur's company. There's nothing that could be farther from the truth. I certainly don't want to end up running a company that an entrepreneur started. What I want to do is motivate the entrepreneur to be successful and run their company well. And then we all do well. But when we look at your pro forma and your financial assumptions, we're going to have to figure out as investors how much our investment in your company needs to grow in order for us to get a satisfactory return. And I don't have time to go into this today, but I'll tell you, and here's a key number or numbers. Investors generally in this industry target an internal rate of return on their investment between about 25 and 75%. In other words, if you tell us your company is worth this amount today, we're going to have to figure out in, let's say, roughly 3 to 5 years, what our internal rate of return will be and how much your company's value needs to get to in order for us to have that 25 to 75% IRR on our money. And I use IRR rather than simply cash on cash return on investment, because IRR measures the value of money over time. If I had a 5x return on my investment, right? 5x on my original investment, that could be good if it happened within, say, 3 to 5 years. But if it took 20 years to get there, the internal rate of return would be very low. So again, I don't have a lot of time this morning to go into depth about IRR, but look that up and understand. Again, if you don't understand that and you're presenting, talk to someone with more finance knowledge and figure out on your assumptions how your company will look to investors if you propose that the company is worth this today, you're selling your shares for this much, and in 5 years or so, you plan on an exit, company will be worth this much. Make sure that matches with investors' expectations. So I'll just say, is it more important to create impact or generate profit? That's a question that comes up frequently, and I'll say it's a false dichotomy. Malinvestment creates negative impact. Here you see just on the left a summary of deposits screen capture from FDIC data. We can look at how much money is on deposit in banks in every county in the country. And here you see for West Virginia, Kanawha and Monongalia County are the perhaps wealthiest counties in the state, but still relative to a place like California, that's not a huge amount of money, 5.9 billion on deposit in that top line. It's precious, right? It's enough to get the job done. I want to say that. There's not a shortage of money. That's not the problem here. But our money is precious. And if we don't invest wisely, we end up in the breadline, like that picture on the right. So for investors, impact investors, we're looking to invest well so that in the long run, our state's economy does well and everyone does well. Capital is precious. I've got a couple bonus slides here. I think we're very short on time, so I will just tell you that I think Ann Barth is going to post these slides on the website, the Tech Connect website or the 3 Steps to Startup website. And you can look at your leisure at some of these questions, which are lessons learned from our successful entrepreneurs that have received investment. And with that, I'll wish you all well, do good, and throw it back to Ann. Thank you very much for having me this morning.
Scott, thank you for those great insights into what should be in a pitch and actually really what you need to do before you even start thinking about making a pitch. That's critical information and our folks need to hear it. So thank you for sharing.